The ego is the system that runs your sense of self. It is made out of thought patterns, emotions, and behavioral loops, and the stories that try to hold it all together. Left unchecked, it creates endless existential searching, chronic disconnection, and the persistent sense that something is wrong. The goal of my videos is clarity, to see your identity and its contradictions for what they are, named precisely, to finally understand what it is that we're all running away from. When I started to help people understand their ego, I found myself in an interesting intersection between pop spirituality and pop philosophy, because I recognized that I don't want to be a guru. I don't want to play this endless game of pretending to have the secrets of the universe uncovered and prop up my authority by always hinting at some spiritual realization or to sell more of my ego architecture audits. At the same time, I recognized that Buddhist descriptions of self-realization or stream entry was exactly what happened to me. And the experience was that of coming into immediate, undeniable contact with the nature of reality and truth. And depending on how deep you are into this, you either understand that there are certain shifts in consciousness that make the nature of reality painfully obvious, and all philosophy then seems like a sophisticated word game of pretending to know something, or you feel threatened by the bracing confidence with which I speak about all of these different fields of psychology, spirituality, and philosophy, while having no formal academic training. And honestly, I get it. It must be quite frustrating to have studied for years for a degree of psychology or philosophy and do all of this work to be accepted in the academic world or to figure out some true nature of existence, all to just not know at the end anything really, for a random guy to tell you what reality is like and that he can help you find it through a 350 euros plus service he offers. It's funny, really. It's almost silly. The reason the nature of reality is so hard to accept is because it gets obfuscated by our intellect. It makes it so that in order for you to believe you can have access to truth, you must follow all these ancient academic protocols and prove yourself worthy in the eyes of those who hold academic authority. Saying no, you actually do not need academic authority nor spiritual authority from anybody in order to know what's true confronts a lot of power dynamics. Power of those who hold all these academic frameworks, and most importantly, the own internal relationship to your own power. Your reality model has certain hierarchies, and it is mostly based on a sense of superiority, inferiority, or trust. And my audience is pretty much split between philosophers and the spiritual types. So for you, the authority is either some sort of spiritual figurehead who you believe has gained some profound realization, or you cling to some sophisticated philosophical framework you are attached to, which gives you a sense of grounding into your own reality. Anything that threatens either of those authorities is going to be perceived as wrong and just uncomfortable. What the intellect hates is that multiple things can be true at the same time. You can both be grounded in a sophisticated scientific model of reality where everything is laws and math, while also recognizing that consciousness and awareness are likely fundamental. You can find truth nuggets in almost all spiritual teachers, and you can find value in almost all philosophical frameworks. Very often, contradictions only exist because of the intellect. Questioning served me very well in my life, both questioning philosophical frameworks or societal frameworks or spiritual frameworks. The intellect is a powerful tool to get towards the truth of the matter and to find inconsistencies in logic. The issues with these ontological ideas or metaphysical frameworks, the nature of reality kind of clashes against what the intellect grinds up against, because reality is pre-intellectual, which is actually what most of your life is like just self-evidently. You don't actually interact with experience in this cerebral manner. This cerebral way of looking at everything is kind of a way to distance yourself from reality. And then also we have these odd models like believing that reality is made out of atoms. It's not that it's wrong, but it's a model that tries to map something that is actually not, something that we come in contact with in immediate experience. Or we imagine atoms to be tiny dots instead of spinning waveforms that are 99% empty, because how are you supposed to interact with something this abstract? Or you imagine that you are some consciousness created by the brain, when in direct experience, this entire framework is pretty much an abstraction of how elusive your sense of identity really is. All these materialistic points convince your sense of self that reality is solid and consistent, and that the universe has concrete laws that stay consistent. And through all these intellectual thought, you try to figure out how you can basically have the sense of control for everything you do. And all frameworks give this illusionary sense of control, because you feel you are identified with this framework. And since you then become this framework, there's not really a room for falsehood, or there's not a room for it to be wrong, because it's just what you are. You kind of become your belief system. And as true as scientific claims are, it doesn't actually tell you what matter is. It only tells you what matter does. And the same is true for logic. It can explain itself within a certain paradigm, but it cannot step outside its own paradigm, and therefore it blinds itself to everything that happens outside of logic. If I tell you that matter is actually made out of qualia, like sensations, then I'm actually not transmitting you useful information for the intellect, because it feels useless. This is not something that you can really do with it, at least not intellectually. So it gets filtered through your own mind and grinds against some very deep foundations you have already decided are the case. Because what most people hear is something that touches the epistemological foundation of their own mind. They don't hear the actual truth or the message. What they believe they can know is what epistemology is. And in a certain epistemological framework, a lot of what I'm going to, or what I am saying, just doesn't compute. And these parts are so foundational to any human brain operating system that receiving this information neutrally is almost impossible for most people. What people get instead is a message from their own operating system that has some core philosophical belief about what reality is or should be, or what can truly be known. The idea that you can't know something is a good way to never step out of your own reality model. Saying reality is made out of sensations sounds like another belief claim. You want me to define what sensations are, or what reality really is, or how can you know that sensations are true and not an illusion of the mind or a brain in the jar or whatever. Maybe you are an anti-realist and say you can never really know the nature of anything foundational, as perception is always non-foundational. And here the contradiction starts, because the Buddhists might somewhat agree with this, right? They would say that all sensations are conditioned and therefore nothing is foundational, not even consciousness. But let's be intellectually honest when we say that there's nothing foundational. Like, what does this actually imply? I strongly argue for the fact that, at least if we take human reality seriously, what anybody who is a human mind that can perceive has access to is sensations. It is literally what everything is made out of. Saying that reality is not made out of sensation is being intellectually dishonest. It requires you to ignore everything that you experience beside your thoughts. That's why I also like to argue a bit and take positions, like making philosophical claims and arguments, when honestly, from my own personal experience, I'm not believing what I'm saying at all. I'm not making an external truth claim about something to convince you. I'm saying what something is like. I'm saying what I see. Any disagreement is your intellect trying to obfuscate something that I say is extremely obvious. And imagine the insult. Oh God, 6 years of philosophical study, trying to figure out the nature of existence, and you still don't know, and here I am coming to tell you that you're missing the most obvious thing of all. But instead of pointing to what is true in some metaphysical reality sense, I find it way more productive to point to your own resistance to what I'm saying. I want you to notice how there's an internal reaction to what I'm saying. Either it is resonance or resistance. Resistance is what I point to when I do my ego architecture audit as well. Because resistance shows your own bias. It reveals to you your own reality model and how you have constructed your own foundational epistemology to think in this way. And anything that contradicts that creates a sensation of resistance, which is basically a threat to your own reality model. The reason this is so important is not because it proves me right, but because it shows that the truth is not what is in question here when you sense resistance. It is your own psychological makeup that is being threatened. It has to be. If you're a human with a brain and you've lived on this planet for a few years, you must have an internal reality model, right? And if you can observe how this model reacts to stuff that contradicts it, then there you have direct access to your own ego. This is how the world is modeled. And now I'm going to say something contentious that I will have to qualify. But what you are running up against when you interact with me is my lack of internal reality model. This is where the guru component comes in, right? Because I'm basically claiming that I deconstructed my internal reality model to the extent that I have now unfiltered contact with some grounding truth. And a lot of my work is trying to package this fact in a way that is helpful to others, empowering to other people, and doesn't aggrandize this, sense that I'm trying to put myself above others, which is not the case at all. I don't feel special, and I don't feel like I have some cosmical, mystical knowledge. I just have removed my egoic conditioning that makes me cling to belief systems and frameworks, and this need for reality to be a certain way. And the end result of this is someone with way too little filters. Now, just because I've deconstructed my own reality model in this way, and I don't have clinging associations to particular words or language, this doesn't mean that every opinion I have is correct or that I have no opinions at all, especially in terms of politics or some other personal stuff. Of course, I don't know all the facts, and certainly academics who have studied at university know way more than I could, just pure content-wise. And this is why there's huge value also in the academic field, and I would never disparage that. But what I don't have is this internal resistance towards belief systems and reality models. And I tend to be ultimately agnostic about pretty much everything. The reason I'm not some enlightened monk is the extent to which this is still untrue. Because it's not impossible to trigger me, I must assume, although it almost never really happens. And disagreements strike me just, very much engaging and fun. And that's also why I make strong reality claims, because in my perception, I'm just pointing to something that is clearly true. So when I say that I don't want to be a guru, I'm aware of the fact that I still can say something factually inaccurate, and I can be proven wrong on factual truth claims. I can honestly be wrong about everything except the nature of how the ego works and how this relates to the immediate experience of reality. That's not something I can be wrong about, because it's just what I am. It's pre-intellectual and pre-cognitive. It's like hurting somebody in physical pain and then trying to tell him that he is not actually in pain. It is impossible. To me, it is a form of ontological being that I'm trying to express and point to. It's not a belief system at all. Although the truth that I'm pointing to converges with a lot of what people would say are belief systems, as it relates to very profound things like the nature of reality and God and all of this stuff, as it all funnels into the human psyche and the human ego. I always try to see where my own attachments lie and where I'm constructing a worldview, but for me it's very easy to argue always both sides of almost anything. And it's funny because most of my titles are very strong truth claims. staking out a strong position, because truth is real, and I'm just pointing my finger at it. If you're operating on a similar frequency to me, I know you get all of the stuff very intuitively, because you have done the psychological work to not experience that much resistance or friction to what I'm saying. And wherever you experience some friction to what I'm saying, your mind might light up and be like, okay, that's interesting, let me investigate this. And then you can figure out for yourself if it's true or not. But it is precisely the mechanism that wants to refute that these contradictions are possible, that builds this intellectual mask that tries to pretend it can't really know the truth, and that it needs to be humble in order for one to be sophisticated. But it's through understanding what the ego is that life becomes very obvious. And it's not just some metaphysical matter, but it's actually about your own well-being. How peaceful and present are you into day-to-day life? It's how the seeking to find some ultimate nature of reality stops. It's understanding and deconstructing the ego that makes you merge into always present awareness and move away from this overthinking restlessness. I can map out your ego through an ego architecture audit. How this process works, you can find in the link in the description. I can help you see what your intellect always obfuscates when you're trying to do it alone. And the real point isn't to gain some abstract knowledge of reality, but to understand yourself and improve your relationship to life. The problem of suffering is what all philosophy and all spiritual seeking always has really been about. Truth makes you more peaceful. That's the real magic of it. If you dislike the world or yourself, it's an identity crisis, hiding behind all the philosophical sophistication. It's the intellect believing it can think itself into a solution when itself has constructed the foundation of its own cage. There's nothing more powerful than to use the intellect on itself to deconstruct it, to see what lies underneath the reactive need to be right or know what's true. Underneath the need for certainty is where reality is found.